So let's talk about midlife and menopause. Over the years, I have seen a high number of my clients struggle through menopause. It is such an important time in a woman's life that it should and can be a very positive experience. So I'm excited to be here today with my friend and colleague, Cindi Buenzli Gertz. She is here to share her own experiences with menopause, as I know it is something that will help many of the women out there. So Cindi helps women awaken their divine feminine within themselves so they can move through midlife and transition to menopause with more peace, clarity, grace, and vibrancy. She's a certified Kripalu yoga teacher and relax and renew trainer that shows women how to rest deeply and break through the habits of pushing, pleasing, and perfecting, which were struggles that she overcame herself within her life. Cindi hosts women's circles, classes, and events where she draws from her passions from the earth, holistic living, dream insight, and the arts, which have all been powerful aids in her own healing journey to help women design their own transformational experiences. As a creator of the Vibrant Women's Program and Inspired Menopause Circle, Cindi inspires her midlife sisters to design their own joyful journey, come alive again, and thrive with abundance. So, thank you for joining me, Cindi, and welcome.
Oh, thanks, Amy. I'm so excited to be here.
Wonderful. So, I know that you have some really great services that you support women through midlife with. Can you share a little bit more about what you offer to us?
All right. So I do enjoy helping women through the changes and the challenges of midlife, especially through perimenopause and
Mhm.
menopause. And it was through my own desire to end my feeling of isolation and invisibility and anxiety around the unknown to
Mhm.
create the Inspired Menopause Circle. So, uh, although I'm a trained yoga teacher, I really love leading women's
Mhm.
circles because of the other elements involved. It's so unlike a class where there's demonstration, observation, then you do. Women's circles have this element of self reflection and
Mhm.
discovery and personal growth and connection with not only yourself but other women. So I love helping women find or rediscover their voices, their
Mhm.
desires, their intuition, and their strengths and their gifts. And I also work with women individually, helping them achieve the health that they desire. And that can be physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, and really co creating their sacred self care to help
Mhm.
them through midlife, perimenopause, or menopause. Because really, in midlife, it's all about creating the body and the being that you want to have
Mhm.
that will need to last you the rest of your days. So I always say to the women I'm working with, if you haven't done that by the time you reach midlife or menopause, when are you going to do that? When are you going to make the space for that to happen?
Absolutely. And there came across a very powerful statement in there to me. And it was the one that you said, creating the body and being that you want to last you the rest of your days. That made me really take a pause for a moment, because I feel that the clients that I seek and a lot of women that I know, we as women tend to provide, we tend to organize, and we tend to lead very busy and hectic lives, but we have a really hard time feeling that we can take that time for ourselves. Usually, as women, we put our priorities down on that self care or that priority list. So, the thought of actually creating what we want may be foreign to many of the women out there. We may feel we don't have time or we don't have the ability to do this, but we absolutely, it's such a critical and important piece that we want to consider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I don't know how much our listeners will know or have if they've experienced women's circles, but can you maybe share a little bit more about how they're run and what people can expect in a women's circle?
Yeah, well, there are so many different themes, challenges that a women's circle could be focused around. I belong to some women's circles. Some of them are about yoga and writing, some of them are about business.
Hmm.
So it could be a challenge or a problem that women center themselves around, or it could be a common theme. And a really good women's circle is going to have some structure, and it's going to have some organization, and it's going to have a nice rhythm to it, and it could involve some of those things I mentioned before. It could have an opening ritual. There could be movement or meditation. There could be rest and reflection, hopefully time for connection and sharing, and the kind of connection and sharing that isn't about necessarily about fixing a problem or coming up with a solution or offering advice, but really uh, it offers an opportunity for women to be mirrors of one another, to reflect, to appreciate what another woman is sharing. And of course, she might ask for resources and ideas and things like that, and then it's okay to offer. But it's really more about creating that safe container and space to be listened to be seen, to be held, to be heard. And the other thing I like about a women's circle is the closing ritual that you will have. So there's this, you know, connection piece that's woven through it that is different than being in a class. Definitely there's a higher vibration when you're in a class with other people who are practicing yoga, but you're also doing that as your own separate individual practice. So a women's circle is more holistic in that sense to me, and I really love them.
Yeah. And I love the connection part, and that you provide really kind of this safe space for women to be able to potentially be vulnerable and to have an avenue to connect with other individuals that may have gone through what they're experiencing, or may be going through it, so that they can, one, share their experiences, but these women can also just share what's on their mind and have someone be able to just listen. I think that every woman needs that in our lives.
Yeah, yeah, we really do. That connection piece is so important. And that made me think of another piece that's important too. The way a women's circle might be run, it might be run as a collective where the leadership or the facilitation rotates, but you also might have somebody like myself who created a women's circle out of
Mhm.
her own need or desire. And it's really important that your leadership um, has done their work, that
Mhm.
it's not that you have to be an expert, but you have to be a good listener, you have to be able to hold space, and
Mhm.
hopefully you've done your own work around what you're healing, especially if you're in a circle that has anything to do with healing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So, can you share a little bit more about kind of your background and what brought you to wanting to work with women in midlife?
Yeah, so just a little bit more about my background. It was my own health crisis that led me to yoga. So I'm a certified Kripalu yoga teacher, and I have a specialty in restorative yoga. I trained with Judith Hanson Lassiter.
Mhm.
And just some personal information about me. I'm married. My husband is an English teacher, so I always say I'm somewhat of a word nerd by association. We have two children, and I like to mention my kids even when I'm talking about my work, because
Mhm.
my family has always been such a huge support of what I do, especially since what I do is from home.
Yeah.
And they've all had a role somehow in supporting me. And, uh, Helen has assisted me at retreats and
Mm.
workshops and demonstrates poses for me.
Mhm.
It's been the model in all of my pictures, which my son Ray has taken. So, it's really I am blessed that
Yeah.
they have been part of my life, and we enjoy a lot of fun things together too. Some of my passions are camping and walking and hiking and biking and swimming and obviously yoga, but I also love the written word and expression, anything
Mhm.
mystical and intuitive. And you mentioned the divine feminine earlier in my introduction, and
Mhm.
recently became a co-author of a book called Awakening the Divine Feminine, and it's 18 stories of
Mm.
healing, inspiration, and empowerment for women.
That's wonderful. Wonderful, and you have had some amazing accomplishments and achievements through your career. So, congratulations on all of those.
Thanks.
So I think that a lot of our listeners have probably heard of restorative yoga. They may have heard of hatha yoga or yin yoga. Can you share a little bit more information on Kripalu? I know that that is something that is newer to me. I've heard that through you, but I think it would be helpful for people to share more information on what Kripalu yoga is.
Yeah, that's a really great question. It is one of the schools of yoga. Hatha or hatha yoga is really the physical form of yoga, and there are many different schools that teach kind of their own method. So Kripalu's method is very holistic. It's really about the whole person. It's not so much about just learning the physical poses and the breathing, but it takes the whole, body, heart, mind, and spirit into account. And it's a
Mhm.
very gentle form of yoga. And, there's anything on the spectrum from restorative yoga, which is the ultimate in gentle, to hot yoga, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners maybe have heard of. And they're all great. But to me, it's wonderful that we have so many different schools
Mhm.
of yoga so that people have a variety to choose from, because what speaks to one person is going to be different than what speaks to another person. And yoga, my students will hear me say the magic's in the practice. And so you find your style that you want to keep coming back to, which, by the way, can evolve and
Mhm.
change over
Yes.
time. I
Yes.
have stayed grounded in my Kripalu roots, even though I draw from a lot of different modalities. And so Kripalu was named for Swami Kripalu, who, one of his students, Amrit Desai, brought his teachings over here and created an ashram, which later became a center with a board of directors. And Kripalu translated means compassion. So it's a very gentle and compassionate school and
Mhm.
style of yoga that really meets people where they're at. And
Yeah.
I just really love it. And I came to it by default, my first two teachers,
Mm.
and I feel so blessed that I didn't really know any better. I just kind of fell into
Mhm.
Kripalu and realized later, like, wow, this is really special. I really love this.
Yeah, and I love that it's kind of all encompassing. I think when I hear a lot of my clients are doing yoga, a lot of them are doing more of I would call a yang form of yoga, where they are kind of much more active and maybe pushing into poses and things like that. And many times it's it's not contraindicated, but counterintuitive with what's going on in their body, that they actually need to step back and more receive and do a more gentler form. So that's where I a lot of times will recommend that restorative or the yin. It blends so beautifully with myofascial. So
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned a health crisis, and it had to do with that pushing
mhm.
and pleasing and perfecting, and really, I'm a person, my constitution, I don't need more of the yang, I need the yin.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that when I first
Mhm.
started practicing, but it took time to understand, and part of my healing was to realize that I needed rest more than I
Yeah.
than I needed more doing. Now I do still have an active practice because that's important. It's important to have that harmony. And
Mhm.
that just depends on every day what I wake up to and what my body's in need of. And
Yeah.
some days it's more activity and some days it's more rest. And I respond accordingly to what my body's saying.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And that's where, that's one thing that I like to try to help my clients understand is it can evolve and it can change on a daily basis. So tuning into the needs of your body and respecting that, and I call it listening and honoring. And there are days where I need something more active as well. There are days where I need something much more passive. And so I love that blend to be able to bring what my body needs, just like you do. That's great. So you
Yeah.
had mentioned your health crisis. Can you share a little bit more about what you have learned through your own healing journey? I know that it has brought you to where you are today, but maybe it would help some of our listeners.
Right. So, what have I learned through my healing journey? Oh my gosh. I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned is that abundance is everywhere and it's available. And what we allow in and what we set our intention on are key and critical. So I
Mhm.
was in this mode of pushing, pleasing, and perfecting. I was an overachiever, and I tell my entire story in the book that
Mhm.
I co-authored. But just to kind of sum it up, I crashed and burned and passed out in
Mhm.
a grocery store and was put on a week's bed rest.
Mhm.
And this was a real turning point for me, and that's when I found yoga. And there still were ups and downs on that journey, and
Yeah.
it's been over 20 years now, and there were still low points. But it's like I tell my students, if the overall trajectory of your path is going in the direction you want, then that's what you stay focused on, because there will be ups and downs in any healing journey, anything you're trying to create. So that's something that I learned. And I also learned that most women in midlife, by the time we've gotten to midlife, we've done a lot of what you referred to earlier about kind of pushing our
Mhm.
needs to
Yeah.
the back burner, our passions, our projects, our health needs, because we're always taking care of somebody else. And also anticipating other people's needs. I think
Yeah.
that's something that's a strength, that's maybe a gift, and also maybe a curse that's unique to women, is that we really do anticipate other people's needs, and sometimes at the expense of our own.
Yeah.
So most women that I know, the other thing I learned is that they suffer from what I call one of the four not enoughs. So,
Mhm.
and I've said all of these things. I don't say them a lot anymore, and when I do, my practices help me to catch myself and reframe very quickly. But not enough time, not
Mhm.
enough resources, and that can be money, but it can also be other resources.
Mhm.
Not enough energy because we're exhausted. And the worst one, in my opinion, and this is really insidious, and it's harder to deal with because it's internal, is some variation of I'm not enough.
Mhm.
I'm not good enough. I'm not
Yeah.
this enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough to go around. So I call those the four not enoughs. And really, this is a scarcity mentality that I think
Mhm.
is really insidious in our culture. It, so often people want us to choose yes, no, this, that. And there's a time
Mhm.
and a place for that,
Yeah.
but not in every single aspect of our lives. And so I was starting to notice how caught up I was in this same scarcity mentality. And what I learned through restorative yoga is you're really letting go so that you can let in. You mentioned the
Mhm.
word passive, and it's a
Yeah.
passive practice. It's an opening of the body and a releasing at the same time.
Mhm.
Because, and for those of people out there who don't really know what restorative yoga is, it's doing poses, but with props like
Mhm.
blankets and bolsters and blocks. And it creates a very passive stretch or opening or release in the body. And so you're receiving,
Yeah.
just like you get massage, it's about receiving, right? And so whenever you practice that, whether it's massage or restorative yoga or Reiki or whatever, you're receiving body work, energy work, you are filling up. You're filling
Mhm.
up that well of being.
Yeah.
And when you let yourself receive and you fill up, pretty soon you begin to notice that there's a lot of abundance in the world, and you
Mhm.
focus more on that abundance than the
Mhm.
scarcity.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And, you know, first off, I'm so sorry that you had to go through such a significant health crisis, but I also know that it has brought you to where you are now. And I'm so proud of you for learning from the experience and making such a huge change in your life, because many of us won't be aware of that. We won't make that choice. And we continue in our lives to burn that candle at both ends, which ultimately down the road just leads to more debilitating health challenges. So it can be extremely difficult to start to break this cycle of pushing and to wanting to please everyone. So, is there maybe one tip that you could give our listeners that you would maybe recommend a place to start if they feel like they're constantly pushing or they're constantly pleasing? Is there just one tip you could give them?
Right. So, having been a one who pushes and
Mm-hmm.
pleases and perfects and overachieves, that is, it's hard to start with
Mm-hmm.
one small little piece because we want to do the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep, we're
But
overachievers.
right, but um, we're also very disciplined, so that can
Mm-hmm.
work to our advantage too.
Yeah.
And discipline yourself to just start with a snippet, is what I call it, a snippet of self-care. So it could be 1 minute of breathing, or hold a pose, or it could be 5 minutes, or it could just be noticing in the moment, what's the most loving thing I could do for myself right now?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're a lot of times other focused. And it might be, well, wow, I've been on my feet for a long time. I need to sit down, or I need to relieve myself, or, oh, wow, I'm really thirsty, but I didn't notice because I was so caught up in that project.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to grab just a drink of water or juice or something. So it's like starting with a snippet of self care
Mm-hmm.
for those of you like me until you can carve out larger chunks of time for yourself.
Yeah.
And that was really a practice for me. I mean, I had to set my timer and
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and then for a long time I'd go beyond that timer a little bit, but eventually
Mm-hmm.
I got it. And my practice now is anywhere on the short end of things like 5 minutes, which is rare. I have to have a lot going on to only take 5 minutes, but more often than not, 20, 25 minutes of restorative yoga during the weekdays.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always been, I've done that for about the last 10 years. And it's a nice transition. I started it when my kids were in school
Mm-hmm.
because I would work at home all day, and then they would come home and I'd have to switch hats. And if I was still caught up in all the projects I was doing, I wasn't available for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I would pause and do my restorative yoga and just kind of clear and release. So, and I noticed that on the nights that I didn't do that, about 7 o'clock, I would get really, really cranky and ornery and
Mm-hmm.
snappy. But as soon as I was in a regular practice of restorative yoga, I was a very different person with very different behavior at that same time of night. And I like to think of like our days are just made up of habits, one habit
Mm-hmm.
after another. So to, create a habit, a snippet of self-care and then expand upon that is a wonderful gift. So
Yeah.
I have a regular daily practice of restorative yoga, and one day a week I don't set a timer. I just, it's usually a day where I don't have meetings and I just let myself be in that pose for as long
Mm-hmm.
as I need to be. And
Yeah.
that's huge for someone who's a perfectionist and a pleaser and an achiever. We like to be on a schedule.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you brought up that setting a timer, because I think that that is something that is so important when you are starting this practice of taking that snippet, is because you will keep doing that task. But you also, when you set that timer, you have to make the conscious choice to be able to step out of that task and take that time for you, and know that you will then come back to that task. And what I've found is, on my really strong administrative days, I have to set many snippets and go out for a walk or something like that because it resets me and I'm much more efficient. I'm much more effective in what I'm doing and motivated, and I don't get exhausted then. And so taking those little snippets throughout your day, it is so worth it to do that.
Yeah.
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 So I know that you're going to be sharing a free gift with our listeners towards kind of the end of our talk today, but I would love to hear a little bit more on maybe a topic or topics that you feel are most important when you're talking and coming and talking to women basically about menopause.
Yeah. Oh, good. We're bringing it back around to menopause.
We are. We talked about yoga. Let's come back to the M word, menopause.
Oh, yeah. So, where to even start? So, well, let me start with my observations.
Okay.
I thought coming into menopause that it was going to be different than my mother's experience
Mm-hmm.
and my grandmother's experience. I'm like, oh, we're the information age, there's going to be so much out there. And I think I was surprised. I was surprised by how much I had to learn on my own. I was surprised by how alone I felt. I
Mm-hmm.
was surprised by the unknown. And I also, I asked my mom, and some of my friends don't have their moms living anymore to ask them, but my mom didn't remember. She was vague about it. So I felt really alone at times. And what I realized is like, wow, well, gosh, we have Google and the internet and everything at our fingertips. Why do I still feel so alone and invisible? And when I started talking to other women, at first I was met with some silence, which surprised me,
Mm-hmm.
until I kind of started finding, the other women who, like me, were going through it. And then I realized, yeah, we are all still feeling very alone and invisible and a little anxious about the unknown. And, we have physical things happening in our body that it feels like your body's betraying you. So, those are some of the hard parts about it. And then there's also some surprises too. So, um, first of all, it's not just a physical experience.
Mm-hmm.
Changes are either not necessarily happening as a result of, some maybe yes, like your brain chemistry changes as you go through
Mm-hmm.
perimenopause and your hormones fluctuate and your adrenals and your body fat stores are getting ready to take over the production of those hormones. So there's that, but then there's also the emotional and the mental and the spiritual shifts or changes or challenges, I like to call them. I don't like to call them symptoms because
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, menopause is not a medical condition,
Mm-hmm.
unless you have something underlying that's requiring hysterectomy, that's a different scenario. But the natural process of menopause, that's what it is. It's a
Mm-hmm.
natural process. And so there have been surprises along the way. Like what an amazing heart opening I've had as part of the process, and wanting to connect more with
Mm-hmm.
people, and the spurts of creativity and
Mm-hmm.
aha moments that I've had. So, we hear so much about all the negative stuff, but
Yeah.
there really are these other wonderful opportunities, spiritual awakening, and connecting with your idea of what spirit is in new and fresh ways. And I like to think of this time as kind of like a portal where you can look back on your first half of life and reflect, and you can see the lessons you've learned from both your successes and your failures. And I know failure is a dirty word to those of us who are always trying to be in perfection and pleasing and producing, and really shifting perspective around that and reframing is a wonderful gift. So there's an opportunity to do that. And it's also an opportunity, as I mentioned before, to really like imagine and visualize what you want the second half of your life to
Mhm.
be like and to create that for yourself. So it's full of potential and possibility and initiation into your wisdom years, which another dirty word, crone. I don't know why we look at that so negatively. And other cultures, it's the shaman, the healing woman, the priestess, the abuelas are all revered as wise women. And we have this opportunity to view ourselves that way. And as soon as we start doing that and doing that collectively, I am hopeful that the perception around menopause will change.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, wouldn't it? It really would. And thank you for sharing all of those. I really do love that you shared not only the hard parts, but you shared a lot of the surprises that you had. I think for many of us, it's really easy to get stuck in those hard parts. For many of us, there's a lot of, I'm guessing also, now I have not entered this stage yet, so I am waiting, but that fear of the unknown, fear of what is this going to be like, because society portrays it as such a negative experience for women. All of these hot flashes, these night sweats, and all of these emotional upheaval and up and down. And so I think a lot of people have that fear of the unknown, of worrying of what is their experience going to be like. But I can really see that a lot of these surprises and these awarenesses and learning that you've had through here, I hope that women can allow themselves to see those insights as well, because I can see it being a very critical part of their transformation through this.
Yeah, exactly. And those hard parts are real, and
Mhm.
we only just touched the surface. I mean,
Mhm.
we could get into dry skin, vaginal dryness,
Mhm.
body odor, lack of libido, all hair loss, erratic periods, heavy periods, no
Mhm.
periods. Uh,
Yeah.
there's so much, and I have to pause to think about how I wanted to articulate this. And that is foggy brain in midlife. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That happens too. It's not the first time, nor will it be the last time that it's happened to me in an interview where, I have this idea of where I'm going and, and midstream. Whoa, it's just
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So those parts are hard. That's what I started with.
Mhm.
They are. There's no denying that. And I think what I wanted to say is that they're hard, but it's comforting to go through it with the support of other women. It's
Yes.
comforting to know that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And when we're left to our own devices, we can get so caught up in those hard parts that we don't see the potential, and we're not working on what that potential could be. We're not dreaming about what we want it to be. We're just like trying to get through the next hot flash, the next sleepless night. And there are tools out there to help with that.
Yeah.
And, so those are available. And it's good to know about those and to be focused on your self care so that at the same time, you can do some of the dreaming and some of the creating and some of the awakening to your intuition and spirit and not be so caught up. And that kind of creates more of a harmony,
Mhm.
more balance in the experience.
Yeah, and I love you bringing up that connection piece again. So many of us, and I am not male bashing here, but many of us have maybe just a husband or maybe our children. They don't know what they're going through. They have no idea. They want to be there to support you, but they don't know what the experience is like. So I think connecting with other women through maybe your women's circle and other ways can be a really nice, supportive avenue for women to just get that support that they need through this time.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think our families want to be supportive, but there's so many factors that,
Mhm.
for one thing, a lot women are having children at different ages than they used
Mhm.
to. So my daughter and I completely overlapped. So you can imagine that raging
Mhm.
hormones going in both directions, right?
Sorry, Mike.
Right? And my dear husband, I mean, men have a cycle too, but it's just
Mhm.
it's not as pronounced as a
Yeah.
woman's. And then, you know, you might not be, close to your sisters or your mom, or maybe, that could be just an emotional closeness, but there can also be a physical distance. And, half my girlfriends that I'm closest to and went to high school with have already lost their moms. So
Mm.
they don't have that person to go to. Like when we come into our menstrual cycle, we can go to our mom or a grandmother or a trusted female teacher, a counselor, and have the talk, right? And there's no like talk for menopause. So
Yeah.
but we can create that. We have the opportunity to create that with each other.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So, Cindy, I know that you at one point were gracious enough to offer to do and walk us through a breathing technique. Is that something that you would like to do today for our listeners?
Yeah, sure, we can do that. And
Great.
yeah, so I think the idea I brought with was, around anxiety and
Mhm.
the unknown, and how can we, take just a snippet around that. So there's a breathing practice called the Kaki breathing practice that I love. And it's great if you have anxiety. I also have adapted it to like really any strong emotion. And women going through perimenopause are likely going to experience strong emotion. And
Mhm.
you can go from zero to rage in like, a half a second.
Yeah.
And you don't know exactly what's going to trigger it. But yeah, midlife menopause is like one giant wake up call. So if there are things that you haven't attended to that
Mhm.
need healing, emotional healing, they tend to bubble up to the surface around this time. And, there's sadness, there's a grief
Mhm.
about losing a part of yourself, a rhythm that has been there continuously for your 30, 35 years, maybe a little more for some women, because that's the other part of the unknown is women can start perimenopause. Most women start mid 40s, but I've known people, including myself, who have started closer to 40, even late
Mhm.
30s. And perimenopause means around the time of menopause. So it actually, women who experience discomforts and challenges like hot flashes and that
Mhm.
past official menopause, which is the cessation of your period for 12 consecutive months. So anything after that is postmenopause. And still, women might experience some discomforts even beyond that.
Yeah.
So that period of time can last anywhere from a couple months to a couple years to 10 or more years. Like
Mhm.
for me, it's definitely been 10 plus years already. And, things are winding down, but I still
Mhm.
get hot flashes, and everything else has calmed
Mhm.
down, thankfully.
Good.
And, things like my libido have returned. So that's another surprise and good news
Mm.
that women have to look forward to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of unknown.
Mhm.
A lot of anxiety can come up this time of life, plus everything that you're juggling in the middle years, the sandwich years between raising children or, immersing yourself in a career and caregiving for aging parents. And then
Mhm.
you throw perimenopause on top of that, and it's crazy making. So I like to use this breath work when I'm feeling anxious, when I'm feeling any strong emotion, when I can't get to sleep at night. I'll start here usually with the khaki breath. Sometimes when I'm flying, I use it, or just any kind of travel where there's a lot of stimuli. Even riding fast in a car with the
Mhm.
noise and the wind and the other traffic whizzing by.
Yeah.
I consider myself a highly sensitive person, and other people who are highly sensitive will connect with that. They'll understand that even traveling can be overstimulating.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a simple breathing practice in through the nose, out through the mouth, your natural rhythm of breathing. Those of you who are more practiced in yoga breathing techniques and you know, you know, deeper breathing practices, you can layer this over it, you can combine them. But just for the sake of simplicity, just your natural breath is all that's required. So you can do this breathing practice anywhere, anytime. Um, and all you simply do is breathe in and acknowledge. You can acknowledge the feeling you're having. You can acknowledge a thought if it's a stressful thought. And then you breathe out and you bring your awareness and your breath down to the earth. So, down to the earth, I mean where you're touching the earth, your grounding points. So, if you're sitting, that's going to be through the bottoms of your feet. Same if you're standing. If you're laying down, on your back, it's going to be all of those points that are
Mhm.
touching the ground, touching the earth, touching the floor, or some kind of prop made of the earth element. So we can try that now for a minute and see. So those of you who are listening to the recording, you're just going to want to notice where you are, find a comfortable seated position. You can try it lying down if you're tired of sitting up. And you're just going to close your eyes and you're going to tune into your body. If you're sitting, have your feet on the floor, make sure you're supported so you're comfortable. If you're in a chair, you might have a pillow behind your back. If you're lying down, you might have one under your head and under your knees. And you're just going to drop into your body and close your eyes. And you're just going to observe. Notice the first thing. Is it a thought or an image or a feeling? Breathe into what you're noticing and breathe out. Bring your awareness and your breath down to the earth where you're touching the ground. And then just keep breathing in and out. In and notice. And it might be a persistent thought or feeling that you continue to notice again and again, especially if some strong emotion has come up: grief, rage, sadness, frustration, all the many different nuances of sadness or anger, anxiety. Breathe in and name that thought, feeling, sensation. Breathe out and down to the earth. And as you do, notice what's happening in your body. Notice this softness that you're inviting in when we move down and release. Breathe in, notice, and name. Breathe out, bringing awareness and breath down to the earth. Breathing in and out of your nose in your own natural rhythm, whatever that might be. As you do that, you might notice the tension starting to unwind a little bit. A softening of the mind, an opening of the heart, a relaxing in the body. Breathe in, notice, name. Breathe out and down to the earth. You might notice the body wanting to make little micro movements as you tune into the tension. Notice where it's built up. And just allow yourself that pleasure. And come back to the breath. Breathe in and notice thought, feeling, or a sensation. Breathe out and down to the earth. And then releasing the khaki breath, just your natural rhythm. And notice what has shifted for you in just that short 2 or 3 minutes. Notice what has changed physically, emotionally, mentally. And then as you feel ready, you can open your eyes. And Amy, if you would like to share what that experience was like for you and any observations, I'd love to hear them.
That was wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. As we've been standing here, as I'm standing, I know you're sitting, but as I'm standing here and we've been talking, I've been feeling areas of my body start to tighten down and some unease in my left diaphragm and ribcage area. And with that breathing, it started to definitely minimize and let go of a lot of that tension. And I have much more ease in that area. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And likewise, from sitting, just even leading it, I felt that I thought, "Ooh, there's some tension growing in my
Mhm.
neck," and I have the urge to stretch it. And so,
Yeah.
the invitation was there to notice those things that comes out of my own experience and what I'm feeling and sensing in my body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know that you have some events coming up, and can you share a little bit more with our listeners what you have coming up?
I do. I do. In fact, I have an event. It's a free event. It's biannual coming up on October 1st, which is happens to be World Menopause Day.
Yay!
Yep, and I also do it on March 8th, which is International Women's Day. It's called Not Your Mother's Menopause. So we talked a little bit about menopause, but we didn't even touch the surface about some of the myths that are out there about menopause, like, oh, you're too young to be starting
Mhm.
with all that, or it's all in your head, or your sex life is over. So there are all these myths that are out there, and our grandmothers especially, and surprisingly, there's another surprise, and I wouldn't put this in the positive column, but medical training for women for menopause is practically nil still.
Mhm.
So and I just learned this recently. The New York Times had an article out about it in their well section. So another shocker, because I've always imagined my grandmother going to the doctor. Oh, that's all in your head, right? We've heard
Mhm.
those stories. And so this event, Not Your Mother's Menopause, was created out of this desire to bust up those myths
Mhm.
and to bring women together and help them to connect with each other, to help them see that they are seen, they are heard, and they are held in in a in a safe space, that there is a place for us to talk about these things,
Mhm.
to learn some tangible tools to learn about them, what can help me move through perimenopause, to unlock what I call the 4 keys to a joyful or an inspired journey, and really to create a new empowered approach or legacy, if you will, around menopause, something that we hand down to our daughters and granddaughters, that takes menopause out of the shadows and really shines a light on it. And of
Mhm.
course, at this event, it's a 2-hour women's circle. There'll also be an opportunity to learn about an inspired menopause and how to take that next step on the journey. And that leads into my next event. So, uh, yeah, I hope women will come and join me for the free event to come see what it's all about. And, many of the things that I said that are part of Women's Circle earlier will be part of this circle. It's a
Mhm.
really great group of women, and there will be new faces and there will also be familiar faces. So, people who have attended this event over and over again, because I didn't say this earlier, but that's one of the things that makes Women's Circle circle's so special is their unique experience, because every circle is made up of different women. And these women are either coming in new or they've been evolving through their experience. So even for them, it's a brand new circle because
Mhm.
they're getting reflections from new and different women. And and it really is amazing.
Yeah, sounds like a great event, and I know that I have signed up, and I am looking forward to it. I'm going to be in the description or comments when we post this video. I'm going to be including a link to this 2-hour women's circle for Cindi of for Not Your Mother's Menopause. I hope many of you will sign up and join me there as well as Cindi. So, you know, Cindi, I love to leave our listeners with just some special insights. So, from your experience and expertise working with women going through midlife, what insight or couple of insights can you leave them today?
Oh boy. Okay. So, well, there's so many.
Hmm.
Some
Yep.
of them I've touched on already. I think one of the things that I didn't talk about yet is my mantra, the magic's in the practice.
Hmm.
So, what that means is there is no magic pill when it comes to
Yeah.
your health. There is no quick fix.
Mm.
That But there is magic, and it's
Yeah.
inherent in the practice. It's about showing up every day. And you might show up on your mat or your massage table or whatever, eh, every time. You're not going to have this wow experience. You might feel like nothing's happening. But I can tell you from my own personal experience and the many, many women that I've worked with, that the magic is in the practice. If you
Hmm.
faithfully show up and practice and attend to your self care, you will see changes. You
Yeah.
will see results, but you have to show up and you have to practice. The magic's in the practice.
Well, and I'd like to say too that what I've found with many of my clients, as well as myself, on the table, that in those moments when we aren't feeling as much, there usually is major magic happening. And that is sometimes where the most powerful work happens, is when you aren't actually consciously aware that something's happening.
Yeah, exactly. It
Yeah.
comes in those moments down the road where you go,
Yeah.
ah. And
Yep.
you have this aha moment or this awakening, or you notice that something has changed significantly,
Yeah.
but you only recognize it when you're looking back.
Yeah, you basically have kicked the pebble, and the process is continuing. I know with the myofascial work, we let people know that upwards of a week after a session, their body is continuing to process, and they may gain insights and information further down the road. I know that's my situation. I don't typically know or do much in that moment, but it comes later on. I've always said that I am slow to process what is there, which
Yeah.
is okay. That's
Yeah, it
yeah,
is.
yeah.
We need that slow space, and that just reminds me, like, people who are tempted to skip their relaxation at the end of their yoga practice.
Mm.
Yeah, that was me. I used to do that.
Oh, it's my favorite part.
I know, and I don't do that anymore because
Hmm.
that's what we call integration.
Yeah.
That's where all of the physical practice that you just did is being integrated and received, and all the
Hmm.
benefits of that are happening under the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's important to take that quiet time. I it makes me laugh because I remember taking a class with my husband, and I love that quiet time. I love that integration. It's one of my favorite times. And we came out of the class, and I asked him what he thought. And during that time, all he could say was, "Well, did you see the heating dog? Did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this?" And because his mind could not kind of come to that quiet space and integrate. So it was like we took completely different avenues
Right.
in it. So if you can really quiet the mind and really just bring your awareness inward, there's some really beautiful magic that happens there.
And again, the magic's in the practice.
Hmm.
The hardest pose to learn is Shavasana. You'd think
Mhm.
it'd be something active like headstand, but Shavasana is all about letting go, and
Yeah.
that's a really, really hard practice to do. It was the hardest practice for me ever to learn. You know, eh, standing on my head took like 1 day to learn how to do, you know? There were obvious steps, of course, I just didn't do
Yes.
it,
Yeah.
but um, learning how to truly let go and practice Shavasana, it does take practice, and I
Mhm.
say that because if there are other people out there like me and Tony, love you, um, yeah, our monkey mind takes over, and we're
Mhm.
thinking about the things we want to do and
Yeah.
produce and get right, and it really took a lot of practice. So take heart that if you're not getting it and just loving it in the first early times of learning how to relax and do restorative yoga, that's okay. It is
Yeah.
okay. Keep showing up though.
Yeah. And with that, I always use the terms, be easy on yourself. It
Yeah.
takes practice. So give yourself grace, be easy on yourself. Just take a little bit more each time and it will come.
Yeah.
So Cindi, what is the best way for people to connect with you, especially if they are interested in some of these great upcoming events that you have?
Yeah. Oh, excuse me. I'm gonna take a little sip.
Hmm.
Yeah, so every week I put out a little what I call snippet of self-care, and I like to think of it as a little love letter
Hmm.
also. And the whole intention around it is to teach a little something and to be uplifting and to inspire a shift in you. And I call it the Joyful Journey Weekly. And right now it's delivered email every Tuesday.
Okay.
And once a month, I go live. And it's a 30-minute free practice that folks can show up to. So that's one of the best ways to keep in
Okay.
touch with me. And I know you're going to include that link.
Hmm.
And also the link for Not Your Mother's Menopause. So that's coming up very soon.
Yeah.
And if somebody is listening to this later and they've missed it, there will be another one in March. And in the in between time, the Joyful Journey is the best way to stay in touch with
Okay.
me, to get to know who I am, to see what's happening and what's coming up.
And I know that you had said that after the Not Your Mother's Menopause, that you were having an additional retreat. In those, if they sign up for the email, will they also receive information on that 3-day retreat?
Yep, yep.
Okay.
People,
Perfect.
when they come to Not Your Mother's Menopause, they'll be finding out more about it.
Okay.
And then, after that, I'll also continue to share via email.
Good. So, Cindi, it has been such a pleasure getting together and talking to you. And I want to thank you for joining me. I hope that our listeners can find this information helpful. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And if anyone does have comments, please don't hesitate to add them into the comment section. Or if you have questions, add them into there. And Cindi and I will be happy to go ahead and answer those questions. But thank you so much, Cindi, for joining me. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with our listeners before we end our talk today?
Yeah, you're very welcome, Amy. This has been a pleasure for me, and I also want to thank you as well for the opportunity to connect and
Mhm.
to share and to have some fun moments and to bring these challenges that we have as midlife women going through perimenopause and transitioning to menopause out from the shadows
Yeah.
and into the light. It's so important that we lift each other up and
Mhm.
be there for each other because
Yeah.
we'll be stronger together.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And yeah, the more that we can do to definitely let people know that they are not isolated, that there are avenues that they can have support and have that connection, I think is so important. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we hope that everyone found this helpful, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.